What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is your boy here today, and we are going to be doing a video on Dead by Daylight on how to make survivor builds. Now, the key to this guide is going to be understanding what I mean by when I make a survivor build, which I'll explain that for you guys in a minute. First, I do want to let anybody know who watches this video, I will be streaming live on YouTube all day tomorrow for a Halloween special. Anytime I'm on Dead by Daylight, I'm going to have a stream up, more than likely. So, just to give you guys a heads up, tomorrow is going to be a big Halloween grind. If I'm on Dead by Daylight, I'm either going to be playing solo as a killer, or I'm going to be playing grouped up as a survivor. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about what I mean. So, if you notice, all of these survivors have perks. Now, all of the killers have perks, but unlike killers, survivors don't have anything that makes them unique other than their skins, which don't provide any gameplay benefit, or their perks. So, as a killer, you don't necessarily have to run a killer perk. And what do I mean by that? So, as an example right here, all of the killers in the game have, with the exception of the Wraith and the Demogorgon, in my opinion, have at least one perk, and the Plague. Actually, that's three. Yeah. So other than the Wraith, the Plague, and the Demogorgon, all of the killers in the game, you could potentially run one of their perks as part of their build. I believe that you should run one perk from each person. But on killer, it doesn't really matter, because all of these killers could run the exact same build. You know, every single killer you have could run Barbecue, Ruin, Noed, and Nurses, and they would all play completely differently because of the fact that killers have a power to them. All of the killers have a power that's unique for every killer, and they have add-ons that are unique for every killer. Survivors don't have that luxury. Survivors are just reskins of one another. The only thing that the survivors share in common are teachable perks. So, when I make a build as a survivor, I have to make my build around certain requirements. So, first off, am I playing solo, or am I playing survive with friends? Because that can drastically change how you make a build. But basically, I'm going to be going over each character that I have with their current builds. Mind you, all of these characters are Prestige 1. Somewhere between 32 and 38 Prestige 1. I have all of the perks in the game unlocked as teachable, killer, and survivor. So, with that in mind, let us start with Dwight. Dwight is a character I'm not going to play a lot right now because I don't have a good selection of perks. So the first thing a lot of people think is that I need to put on all tier 3 perks. If I run all tier 3 perks, I'm running Leader, Kindred, Distortion, and Deliverance. Now, while that is not exactly a bad build, it's not a very good build at the same time. Distortion is good, Deliverance is alright, Kindred's alright, Leader's alright. It's not a particularly good build to run. Now, somebody told me, I ran into somebody today that, well, if you run all tier 3 perks because that's what you have, well, then you get into the situation of this guy I had today. He ran tier 3 Sprint Burst, and he ran tier 3 Dead Hard. You cannot use those two perks together. You cannot combo Sprint Burst with any other exhaustion perk in the game other than Adrenaline and Head On. So, that was stupid. And even then, you can't really combo it with Head On. But, I digress. Here's my problem. So, what I run on Dwight, I have... This is a build that I run in team play. I run this in a team-based scenario. I have the distortion tokens to let my team know what the killer is running for perks. I have borrowed time to get safe unhooked. We're going to live forever to get more blood points off of that, and prove thyself to get gens done. The way I have perks set up generally, and a better idea would be to show you David King instead. Let's go to David King, and I'll show you the build for him. What you need to do is you need to create an idea of your 4 perk slots, what you want to run. So the first perk that you have is that character-specific perk. I have that in row 2, and I'll explain why in a sec. So your anchor perk is your main perk on each character that you are primarily going to run. So just to run down that list of what you see, I'll show you real quick. So for Dwight, you're going to see Prove Thyself. Adrenaline for Meg. Self-Care for Claudette. On Jake, you're going to see Calm Spirit. On Nia, it's going to be Balanced Landing. Ace has Ace in the Hole. It'll be Borrowed Time on Bill. List for Feng Min. Lori has Decisive. Dead Hard for David King. Pharmacy on Quentin. Stakeout for Detective Tap. Boil Over for Kate. Diversion for Adam. Distortion for Jeff. Poised for Jane. Flip-Flop for Ash. Fixated for Nancy. And Camaraderie for Steve. Now, I wanted to explain that is the best perk that I will run for each character. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it the best perk for the character or the highest level I have. Now, the idea is you do want to have backup perks. So, like Dwight, I have Bond. On Adam, I do have Deliverance. On David King, I have We're Gonna Live Forever. But the general design for most of my builds, which we're going to talk about, is I have 3 perk slots that are locked at all times and 1 that rotates out depending on what I'm going for specifically. So on a build like this, if I was playing solo, I would be taking off We're Gonna Live Forever and replacing that with Deliverance, and I would keep this as my go-to build. This is not a particularly good build, but it's better than what I have. Meg is a better example of what I'm running. So I have Self-Care, which I have locked, because I think Self-Care really is a necessity for most survivors. You can play around it, and if you do, it frees up an extra slot, but generally, it's a very specific build I would have to be running. I keep Dead Hard, so I have an Exhaustion perk, and I keep Adrenaline because that's the Meg perk. By running Adrenaline, I don't have to focus on the rest of it. Adrenaline is also the highest level Meg perk that I have. It's tier 3 versus Sprint Burst, which is tier 1. Now, I could run Sprint Burst and fill both the Dead Hard and the Adrenaline story, but I don't like Sprint Burst. That's another story, though. So, right now I have Borrowed Time. I could easily replace that with Ace in the Hole, Dark Sense, Spine Chill, Unbreakable, Poised, and that's just the short list. That's not including something like Technician or Boil Over, Quick and Quiet, We're Gonna Live Forever, Plunders, Diversion, Tenacity. These are all just various things that I can run. The general consensus is this perk slot should be able to change depending on what you're planning on running. So as an example, if I'm running a Blood Point offering for Boldness, then running something like Poised is going to be better. Something like Spine Chill is not as good. Poised is better because I can do more bold actions and not get caught potentially. On Claudette, I run... So Claudette is another solid thing. You generally want to have... So this is, again, your build. So what you want to have is there's 3 perk slots that you want to have occupied. Now, for a character like Claudette, where Self-Care, which is normally one of my anchor perks, which I call it, basically you have an anchor perk, which is something that you run that helps you out throughout the game, plus you have Self-Care, and you have the character-specific perk. Now for Claudette, I can run 2 anchor perks. So what is an anchor perk? An anchor perk fits into one of 3 categories, okay? So category number 1 is an exhaustion perk. That would be Balanced Landing, for example. This is something that you are going to use to extend or break chases to get away from the killer. The next type of perk that we have, and Claudette has an example of all 3, is going to be a high-level anchor perk. So it is a perk, like Prove Thyself, that may or may not be countered out and may or may not be useful in the game, but it is a level 2 or a level 3 perk that is strong, it's effective, and while it may be countered out, it's a strong enough perk where it's worth running. Or you have a perk that is just generally useful throughout the game for you. That would be Botany Knowledge. So the point of this build right here is the Botany Knowledge, which makes me heal myself faster with Self-Care. It makes me heal other people faster. It just all around pairs well with Self-Care. I have my Exhaustion perk, and I have my primary Anchor perk right here. You know, where I was talking before, having Adrenaline, Adrenaline here is going to be the character-specific perk. Dead Hard is the Anchor perk, and I carry Self-Care. Dead Hard is my Exhaustion perk of choice. It's either going to be Dead Hard or Balanced Landing half the time. So looking at Jake, Jake is in a similar situation. I run Calm Spirit on Jake. I run Calm Spirit because it's tier 3 and Iron Will is only tier 1. I like Calm Spirit. If I could ever get Iron Will higher than fucking tier 1 on any character, I would probably slap it on here. And that's the thing with characters that do have multiple good perks. So, as an example, you know, Steve has Camaraderie, Second Wind, Babysitter. You could put them on any one of those 3, depending on what you have. Adam has both Diversion and Deliverance, and Autodidact if you feel kind of memey that he can pop on. All 3 of Jeff's you could put on. Tap, all 3 of Tap's you could put on. Quentin's got Vigil and Pharmacy you can kind of bounce between. David, We're Gonna Live Forever, and Dead Hard, 2 solid choices. Nia has Streetwise and Urban Evasion that are kind of alright, and you've got Balanced Landing that's far better. Bill's got Unbreakable and Borrowed Time. Feng Min has Alert and Lith. Jake has Calm Spirit and Iron Will. Claudette's got Self-Care and Botany. Meg has Adrenaline and Quick and Quiet. And Dwight has Prove Thyself and Bond. So if you have a character like Dwight that is capable of having 2 good perks that you would consider to be the perk for that survivor you run, like Calm Spirit and Iron Will, you can run whichever one of the 2 you want based off of what you have. So I've got Self-Care because Self-Care. I've got Dead Hard as my anchor perk, that's my exhaustion perk, and then I have We're Gonna Live Forever that I can switch out if I want to. Now, in this actual build right here, because I have Calm Spirit, I don't necessarily need Dead Hard to get away from the killer. I can be a bit more risky having the Calm Spirit. So that is why you see We're Gonna Live Forever at the top slot. That's my anchor perk, especially because it's tier 3. So, if I need to bring something else into the game, for example, Prove Thyself or Poised, I would probably switch out the Dead Hard for it, if I'm being completely honest. Next up we have Nia. Nia is a character that right now I just don't have a lot of stuff on, where it's hard to pair up. So I have Self-Care and I have Balanced Landing as my 2 anchors, and then I usually bounce between Will Make It and Borrowed Time. Those 2 slots, those could be taken out by Stakeout, by Streetwise, by Unbreakable, Spine Chill. I have Dead Hard, which is a higher level, but Balanced Landing is a constant on Nia. I will always have Balanced Landing on Nia. And because I don't want to run Dead Hard and Streetwise, I run Balanced Landing. Because remember, I have to pick a perk of Nia's to run, and I'm not going to run Urban Evasion. I have stuff like Tenacity I could maybe put in there if I want to take like Borrowed Time and Will Make It off, but it's not necessarily a great combination. For Ace, the only good Ace perk that I will run is Ace in the Hole. So Ace in the Hole is always in there, as is Self-Care. So that leaves my other 2 slots. Now I have Dead Hard. Again, that's my exhaustion perk of choice. In this situation, I don't have anything else. So, besides Sprint Burst, which I wouldn't run, I run the Dead Hard. I have Spine Chill in there as well. Spine Chill, though, I can switch that out pretty easily. I do have Prove Thyself. You know, I do have Leader, I've got Spine Chill, I've got Unbreakable and Streetwise. Those all pair up pretty well. It just depends, again, what you're going for. Next one is going to be Bill. Now, Bill is an interesting character because of the way I have him set up. So, on Bill, I have Self-Care, I have Borrowed Time, which is my anchor perk, I have Dead Hard, which is my exhaustion perk. And then I have Detective's Hunch, which I would switch in and out. Now, I can take Borrowed Time and switch that out for Unbreakable if I need to. I have Unbreakable there. I also have things like Second Wind, Stakeout, Pharmacy, I got Botany, Prove Thyself. I've got different perks that I could put in place of Detective's Hunch. So I don't necessarily have to run that, but because it's tier 3, I choose to run that, and it's a solid perk. It's better than some of the other stuff I would have to run. My Feng Min build is pretty set. This one and my Jane one are kind of close together, but they play completely differently. So this is a hybrid injury build. So this is what I talk about when you have an anchor perk. So what I have is I have Self-Care and I have Lith. Because Lith is my teachable from Feng Min. Self-care is my, well, self-care. Now the thing here is I have Resilience 2, and Resilience is a very solid perk to run. I also have Adrenaline, and these two perks pair up very well, running Resilience into Adrenaline. You have 6% faster everything. Faster repair, sabotage, heal, unhook, vault, cleanse, opening gate, searching. Whatever it is, it's faster with Resilience. And I have Adrenaline, which heals me at the end of the game automatically. So in a late game scenario with 1 or 2 gens left, if I know I can be kind of stealthy, I will play around the Resilience to keep that 6% bonus, and then use the Adrenaline to automatically heal myself. That is a good combination. Now, what if I don't want to run this build? Well, I can take Lith off and put on, like, Alert or Technician. I have Stakeout I can swap out for the Resilience. I pop on maybe Unbreakable instead of Adrenaline. It doesn't matter what the situation is. I have versatile options. So this is about playing around your anchors. Adrenaline is a great perk for me to run on Feng Min because I like to be a bit more aggressive on her. So the Resilience pairs well with it. I could swap either of these out and consider either one the anchor perk. For Lori, I have DS. I run DS. My rule with Decisive is I only run it if it is tier 2 or 3. I will not run it at tier 1. I don't even like it at tier 2, but I'll run it if I have it. The only reason why I run Decisive where I do is because I have Object of Obsession and Soul Survivor are both tier 1. And both of those perks I do not want to run as a tier 1 perk. So, I run my Decisive as my Teachable. I've got my Self-Care, and I have Dead Hard because that's my Exhaustion perk of choice. Now, my other slot varies. I've got Adrenaline if I want to be very toxic, if I'm planning on juking the killer. I have Streetwise if I'm planning on bringing a good item. I have Poised, and I have Stakeout. So Poised is another perk I can run if I'm planning on juking the killer, and Stakeout is a perk I will put on if I'm planning on being objective. All of these perks are tier 3, so all of these make very solid anchor perks. So it doesn't matter what I have between Adrenaline, Streetwise, Poised, or Stakeout. One of those 4 can always occupy that spot depending on what I think our team needs going into it in Survive with Friends. For David, I already explained this a little bit, so I'm just going to cover it real quick. Self-Care, Dead Hard, which fills both spots. We're going to live forever just so I can get bonus blood points, but I can take that out if I need to. And then Ace in the Hole because it's the highest level perk that I have, and I like the perk. I could put in Adrenaline or Pharmacy very easily in place of either of these perks. You know, Alert is another one. And another example, too, of not being reliant on self-care is how to properly make a build. So in a case like this, where I run a No Myther build, I can switch this build around so easily, it's not even funny. So, this is the build that I would probably run if I was running a No Myther build, because I have my No Myther, which would be taking the place of Self-Care. I have Dead Hard, which is my anchor perk. I have Resilience to buff my anchor, which is also my exhaustion perk. And I have Flip-Flop just for the hell of it. You know, maybe I put in Adrenaline. Even though I'm not going to get the bonus heal, I still get that burst of speed that would override my current exhaustion. So that's an example of being able to be versatile enough to come up with a very flexible build. Or at the same time, I could create a build like this. This is also very viable. Having Self-Care as my Self-Care, Dead Hard as my anchor perk and my exhaustion perk, Resilience as my filler perk, and Adrenaline as my real anchor perk. So I have the Resilience to buff the anchor. Moving on, Quentin. This is a great example of what to do on a character that you don't have self-care on, and how you can turn an anchor perk into that. So I have Pharmacy. Pharmacy is my Teachable and my self-care. I don't have a way to heal myself, so I have to run Pharmacy. Now I put on both Adrenaline and Resilience to pair with this. So Dark Sense is the perk I would take off if I need to switch. Basically, I have Adrenaline to heal myself if I can make it to the end of the game, and I have the Resilience so I can get stuff done along the way if I'm not getting a med kit, or if I run out of juice and I can't finish my heal, it lets me get stuff done faster to get to the end game for the adrenaline heal. And I have Dark Sense so that I can avoid the killer a little bit while I'm injured because I don't have self-care. This is a great thing. Now, I can potentially go for a few things here. I can put on Autodidact and Botany and try and go for healing others. I can put on Tenacity, so I can try and maybe get away from the killer. I could take off the Dark Sense, put on This Is Not Happening as a good way to buff up the injury build, which, by the way, I will be doing for an Archives challenge. I won't have to run no Mythril, I'll just run this build. So, we're gonna live forever, but this is my safest bet until I can get self-care and make my build where I want it to be. For Tap's another great example because I can use all of his perks. So I have Stakeout, which is my primary perk of his. I have Tenacity and Detective's Hunch, but they're tier 1 and I don't really want to run it. However, the trade-off is, if I want to run Spine Chill instead of Stakeout, I can put Detective's Hunch on as my filler. So I run the Stakeout, I run the Spine Chill, I run Detective's Hunch, I've got my Self-Care, and then the last spot can be a filler, like Borrowed or Decisive. For this build, the Borrowed was the anchor, and Decisive was what I used to fill with it because I was going for kind of a meme build. You know, I've got Second Wind I could put in there. It just depends on what you want to do for the situation. Hey, another great example. Boil Over's the anchor, is the teachable. Self-care, that's your self-care. And Spine Chill's my anchor because it's tier 3 and I like running it. So I would rather run that because it's tier 3 than something like Stakeout. And then my last spot is a filler, so that's like Borrowed Time. If I wanted to be memey, I could put on Autodidact and Stakeout. These work very well together. But the thing is, I just don't have anything. I don't necessarily want to do that. Another thing, too, is I do have Balanced Landing as an exhaustion perk, but I don't necessarily need an exhaustion perk on every character. Now, where this is tier 1, and I get more value of having Borrowed Time at tier 1, that's why you see I don't run an exhaustion perk on every single character, even though I don't have one. Self-care, I will run no matter what if I have it, pretty much. Especially if I'm playing solo. If I'm playing in a group, I might not. But generally, it's better to be safe than sorry. Adam is a character where I don't get to use Deliverance a lot in team play, so I run Diversion as his teachable. Even though I may get more value out of the Deliverance than the Diversion, it works better for the team. I have Poised as my anchor perk, and then the Botany can be switched out for whatever. Spine Chill, Calm Spirit, DS, Dark Sense, whatever. I do have We're Gonna Live Forever, but you know what I'm saying. Jeff, another example. Because I can use all 3 of Jeff's perks, all 3 of Jeff's perks are pretty good. Distortion, Aftercare, and Breakdown. It doesn't really matter what I put there. It just depends what I want to go for. I don't usually run Aftercare, though, because I want that tier 3. I've got my Self-Care, I've got my Dead Hard, which is my exhaustion of choice, and then I have Poised because that's my tier 3. That's what I'm going to run, because that'll give me the best chance of playing stealthy. I've got tier 3 Poised, and I've got tier 3 Distortion, so I have ways to hide myself from the killer a lot more effectively. I've got Dead Hard to get out of jams, and Self-Care to get out of other jams. It just works. Jane has a similar build. The funny part is, I actually ran tier 3 Quick and Quiet as my tier 3 perk until I got tier 3 Prove Thyself, which took the spot, because that was a better perk. I've got Lith, I've got Poised. These stack very well. Poised is my teachable, Lith is my anchor and my exhaustion, and I've got the self-care. So this all pairs very well to give me some evasion, some stealth, and some gens. Ash is interesting. So I've got my self-care, I've got my flip-flop as my teachable, and I have Unbreakable as my anchor. I pretty much have to run the Unbreakable with flip-flop in order to make flip-flop a little bit better. Because the other Ash perks are trash. I have Metal of Man, but Metal of Man is bad. It's very unreliable, it's very inconsistent. So I don't really run that perk, even though it could be better than flip-flop. I'll take the risk on flip-flop. Buckle Up is absolute garbage, so I can't run that. So even though I would probably be better served by running, say, Medal of Man in place of Flip-Flop, which would then free up 2 perk slots, essentially, I can't do that because Medal of Man is not going to help me. And Flip-Flop might. So it is worth me running the extra perk slot to maybe get Flip-Flop to work. And I have Balanced Landing just to get away from the killer, just because I don't have a good exhaustion perk to run with it. So I have Balanced Landing. You got Nancy. We're almost done. I only got 2 people left, so. You got Nancy. I do not like any of Nancy's perks other than Fixated. I love Fixated. So that is my perk of choice for her Teachable. I have Dead Hard, because Dead Hard is my exhaustion perk of choice. That's my anchor perk. And I have Self-Care, because it's Self-Care. Now, the third slot here is interesting. I have Tier 3 Better Together on. Why I have that on is because my only other options that realistically I would run would be Second Wind and Adrenaline. I have Prove Thyself, but I run Prove Thyself on a lot of characters, so I wouldn't necessarily want to run that. And I have Plunderers, which I might put Plunderers on. But here's the thing. Better Together is Tier 3, so for right now, I leave that on. Because it's Tier 3, it's the most valuable thing that I have, even though I don't necessarily like it, and I don't see getting value out of it. But before I go into a game, I'd probably switch it off. And then another good example here would be Steve. So Camaraderie is my favorite perk of his, so I would run that. I have Self-Care, and then I have Distortion as my anchor perk, because I don't have a lot to go with, and I run Second Wind with that. I do not have an exhaustion perk that I want to run on him. So I have Distortion to be a bit stealthier. Now the Second Wind can probably come off in favor of, say, Adrenaline. Maybe We're Gonna Live Forever so I can get up some more blood points, or Unbreakable for some survivability. Realistically though, because this is Tier 2, it's better than the other Tier 1 stuff that I have. Again, I'm going to keep this on my build until we go into a game. Now, I have a Party Streamer on. Well, the Second Wind is going to go away in favor of We're Gonna Live Forever if I'm going into a game with the Party Streamer. But if I'm not running the Party Streamer, if I'm running a normal build, like with a Pustule, then I'm going to have the Second Wind on instead, even though it's harder to get value out of. That's the way I look at my survivors. So that is a quick explanation using the perks that I currently have available as to how you should set up builds. And if you notice from how I explain people like David King and Jane, it's always good to have multiple options available to you, but to have a few core perks you like to play around. Things that are reliable that will help you get in and out of games. That is why you see I run Self-Care on every character. I have an exhaustion perk, which is either Balanced, Dead Hard, or Lith on every character. There's a few people that I don't run it on that I don't have it on, or a few people that I don't run it on where I don't get as much value from that perk. So, thank you guys for